Let me tell you something that a lot of people feel, but almost nobody admits. Some people feel more like themselves online than they ever do in a room full of people. Not performing, not pretending, not calculating what expression to make or how long to hold eye contact before it becomes strange. Just present, comfortable, finally able to say the thing they've been carrying around in their head for days without the physics of a face-to-face conversation crushing it before it leaves their mouth. And somewhere along the line, they started to feel ashamed of that, because the world has decided that real connection only counts if it happens in person. That if you'd rather send a voice note than attend the party, something is wrong with you. That choosing a screen over a crowd is withdrawal, avoidance, a symptom. But what if it isn't? What if, for certain people, virtual space isn't a substitute for real life? What if it is real life, just without the cost? Most people assume that introverts who retreat to online spaces are hiding, running from connection, too anxious to handle people, building a digital fortress to keep the world out. But that's not the full truth. Rarely the whole story. Sometimes the person who comes alive in a text thread or a forum or a voice channel at midnight isn't hiding at all. They're finally arriving somewhere they can actually breathe. Not because the online world is fake, but because something about its structure removes the specific kind of friction that costs them the most. No bodies to read, no rooms to feel, no performance of spontaneity. No pressure to respond before you've thought it through. Just words. And the time to mean them. There is research behind this. A real study with a finding so precise it sounds like someone finally named something you already knew. In 2002, psychologist Yair Amichai-Hamburger at Bar-Ilan University published a study in cyber psychology and behaviour examining how personality shapes the experience of online interaction. His finding was this: introverted people locate their real self on the internet. Extroverts locate their real self through traditional face-to-face interaction. Read that again slowly. Introverts don't go online to be someone else. They go online to finally be who they actually are. Not escaping reality, accessing a version of it where they can function without the tax. Here's what that tax actually feels like. You walk into a social event and something in you immediately begins calculating. How many people? How loud? How much unstructured small talk you'll be expected to generate on command? How long before you can leave without it being noticed? It's not anxiety, it's not shyness, it's something far more physical than that. Your nervous system is already running at a higher baseline than most of the people in that room. Hans Eysenck, one of the most cited psychologists of the 20th century, spent decades researching the neuroscience of introversion. His finding, supported by brain imaging studies conducted decades after his death, is this: introverts have higher baseline cortical arousal. Their brains are already more active, even in calm conditions. This means that external stimulation, noise, bodies, social expectation, the simple unpredictability of other humans, reaches their threshold faster. It isn't a choice, it isn't weakness, it is the structure of the nervous system itself. Extroverts seek stimulation because their baseline is low. They need the noise, the crowd, the energy of other people to reach their optimal level. Introverts are already there. Add a room full of people and they go past it. So when someone leaves a party early and opens their laptop in a quiet room and finally exhales, that's not failure. That is a nervous system regulating itself back to baseline. That is the body doing exactly what it was built to do. Not antisocial, running on a different kind of fuel. And this wasn't invented by the internet. It started long before that. If you think back, really back, you were probably the child who was most yourself in small, contained spaces. Not the playground, but the corner of it. Not the classroom, but the moments before the bell when things were quiet enough to think. Not the birthday party, but the car ride home, finally alone with your own thoughts, when you could feel yourself returning to yourself. You probably had an internal world so vivid that the external one often felt like an interruption. Not a distraction from real life, the most real part of it. And if the spaces available to you felt too loud, too unpredictable, too full of social rules you hadn't been given the manual for, your nervous system found the quietest corner it could and stayed there. That wasn't dysfunction, that was intelligence. You were finding the environment that matched your wiring, the way water finds level. The internet, when it arrived, was simply the largest quiet corner that had ever existed. A space where you could engage at the speed of your own thought. Where you didn't have to perform spontaneity. Where you could disappear for a moment and no one would notice and come back when you were ready. And that was normal and no one expected an explanation. For some people that wasn't escapism. That was the first time a social space had ever been designed for the way their brain actually worked. And the science didn't just capture the preference, it captured why it works. Amichai-Hamburger's research pointed to something specific. Online interaction removes the physiological costs that make face-to-face socializing exhausting for introverts. The absence of real-time pressure. The ability to process before responding. The control over your own presence. When you're visible, when you're not. How much of yourself you offer. And when. These aren't trivial preferences. They are structural accommodations for a nervous system that processes differently. Think about what face-to-face conversation actually demands. You must track tone, facial expression, physical posture, subtext, and the social calendar of what can and cannot be said, all simultaneously, all in real time, with zero pause to think, in an environment you did not design and cannot control. For an introvert, that is not a social interaction. That is a cognitive sprint. And the moment that sprint ends, the moment the door closes and the screen opens and the pace becomes yours, something in the body recognizes safety. Not because the outside world was dangerous, because this pace is sustainable. Not hiding from people, choosing an environment where you can actually meet them. The world doesn't make it easy to say this without being misunderstood. We live in a culture that treats physical presence as proof of engagement. That reads online preference as isolation, digital closeness as lesser, and the introvert who thrives in virtual space as someone who needs to get out more. But here is what that culture is measuring presence against. The extrovert experience. The person for whom a crowded room is naturally energizing. The person whose real self arrives fully formed at a party and expands in the noise. They built the rules. Of course, their way of connecting became the standard. Your ancestors did not live in open-plan offices. They did not attend networking events. They did not give 45-second elevator pitches. They sat around fires in small groups and spoke when they had something to say. They had time before they responded. They were not performing extroversion on demand. The demand is modern. The exhaustion it produces in you is not a flaw, not defective within a culture built for a different nervous system, misread by it. Maybe you've spent years trying to want what other people seem to naturally want. The spontaneous plans, the crowded tables, the ease of walking into a room of strangers and feeling like that is somewhere you belong. And maybe the trying left you with something that looked like antisocial behaviour from the outside and felt from the inside more like grief. Grief for the version of yourself who could never quite arrive in the spaces everyone else seemed to fit. Here is what shifts when you stop trying to want what doesn't fit your wiring. You start noticing what you actually have. The depth of the connections you do make online. Where you found people who matched your exact frequency. In communities, the physical world would never have assembled. The conversations that went somewhere real because you both had time to think. The relationships that formed not through proximity, but through genuine alignment of thought. Not fewer connections, different ones, built differently, often more durable because of it. The introvert who lives partly in virtual space is not someone who settled for a lesser life. They are someone who found an architecture that fits the way their mind actually moves. Not consolation, the right shape, finally. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes with being an introvert in a world that keeps telling you to show up in ways that cost you everything. The loneliness of performing presence while feeling absent. Of being physically in the room and spiritually somewhere else entirely. The digital world didn't create that loneliness. For many, it quietly ended it. It gave introverts a place to be fully present, on their own terms, at their own pace, in a structure that didn't require them to perform being okay. That is not a small thing. That is what it feels like when the environment finally catches up to the person. You are not someone who is bad at real life. You are someone whose real life has always included an inner world too large for most physical rooms to contain. The screen didn't make you retreat. It gave the part of you that was already there, already thinking, already alive, already full of things to say, somewhere to arrive. Not absence, presence at last, in the right space. Not avoiding connection. Choosing the kind that doesn't cost you who you are to maintain. Not broken, differently wired for a world that is slowly, finally, being built around more than one kind of mind. There is something worth naming before you go. The people who feel most themselves online are not the ones the world needs to worry about. They are the ones writing the threads that make strangers feel less alone at 2 a.m. The ones whose measured words carry more care than most improvised ones. The ones who show up, reliably, thoughtfully, without fanfare, in the quiet spaces where real things actually get said. They are not hiding from the world. They are contributing to it in the exact way their nervous system was built to contribute. Not less present, present where presence is possible. Not withdrawn, selectively, sustainably, deeply. There. I want to end with a question, and I mean it as a genuine one, not a prompt. Think about an online space, a community, a conversation, a friendship, where you felt more like yourself than you usually do in person, where the distance actually created closeness instead of removing it. Tell me what that space was in the comments. Because the specific answer you give, the particular corner of the internet where you finally exhaled, says something about you that I think is worth saying out loud. Your experience adds something to this conversation that a script can't. I'll be reading everyone.